welcome Barb Quincey.
Thank you.
Formerly known as Sister Cyril Therese. Now, and you are from, I know you from Jackson. I know you're residing here in Adrian right now. How did you get Cyril Therese?
I came from Lansing, and Sister Cyril Therese taught at our school our grade school when I was there.
Okay.
And then we kept contact all the way through high school, and she died my senior year. I was waiting to tell her that I had decided to enter.
Really?
And she died of a heart attack. And so I became the second Sister Cyril Therese.
Wonderful, wonderful. She probably was a great mentor for you. Well, usually we start, I kind of got off the thing here because I'm taken back by your beautiful work here, masterpieces. We like to start with a little background about your family history. Many times we know about places the sisters have been, but just something about your background, your growing up and family members.
My family, I grew up in Hazlitt, which is outside of East Lansing.
Okay.
And my mom and dad, my mom came from Durand and my dad came from Corona, and they married in Durand and then moved to Lansing, which is where my dad had a job. And my mom's family was very, very close. Many times she had several brothers that lived with us for a short time when they got a job in Lansing. And my mom wanted a very close family. So when I entered, there were 4 children. I was the oldest, and the youngest was my sister Patty, and she was 4. Mm-hmm. And John was 7. We're very far apart. And Susie was 14. No, she was 13. And I did not know that my mother was pregnant. She didn't tell me because she had very difficult pregnancies, and she knew I would stay and help her. Susie knew. She had told her, it's time you became the oldest. And then I was here in Adrian. I stayed into...
So when did you enter?
I entered in 1960. And I'm that huge perpetual helper crowd.
Okay. When you say huge, how many were there?
I think there were 120 some that entered.
Wow. Okay. Right.
You know, It was very big. And I stayed in here to study for 6 months.
How did the family take your entering, like your siblings, your brothers?
My dad had a hard time because he was a convert. He never knew nuns.
Okay.
And he was very concerned about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He came to really like it. He grew in his acceptance, which I think often happens.
Right, right.
Then I went to Chicago and taught at St. Mary's Star of the Sea in Chicago for 3 years. I had a wonderful mentor there. I taught 7th grade.
Okay.
Sister Mary, Edward Mary, her name I think was Mary Wyville, was little bitty Mary Wyville. And she was my next door neighbor in the classroom. She taught math, and I taught English. The interesting thing was my background in college was science and math. But as Adrian Dominicans, we did what we learned. We did well on whatever we were expected to do.
The grace of God. Oh,
Yes,
I know. Oh, my
it was
word.
great. And I taught there for 3 years. During that, my sister Mary was born when I was a novice. Okay. And my sister Kathy was born when I was at St. Mary's Star of the Sea. Now, my parents would bring all the kids and come to visit. And my mom and the girls would stay with us at the convent because...
Wonderful.
And my dad and my brother would go down to a motel close to there. And my mentor there was Sister Rose Cecile Mativier.
Okay. Mm-hmm. You had great mentors.
She was fabulous because she would say to me, she'd help me with my lessons, and then she'd say, how did your day go today? And I'd tell her, and she'd say, oh, tomorrow go in and say this. And when you say this, this is how they're going to respond. And then you come back and say this. And it would always work. Always work. I learned that later, when I was a mentor for somebody in my later life, she would meet me. She'd send me a note, I got to see you at change of class. And so I would go and she'd say this, and I'd go through the whole thing. Tomorrow you go in and you respond this way, and this is what they're going to say. And she'd say, it always works. I said, well, you learn from a good person,
That's good.
you get better.
You're grateful. You're
I'm
grateful
very
for the
grateful
mentors
for them.
that you had. So how many kids in the family altogether?
There's 6.
There's 6 of you, and you're the oldest.
Yes.
Okay.
The unusual thing was, because I never even lived with my younger sisters.
Right.
My mother, because of her close ties with her family, was going to be sure that they all knew me.
Good, good.
And so when I was at my second mission, which was St. Philip Neri in Chicago, she put my sister Mary, who was the one that was born when I was a novice, on the train. And she was only 8 years old, sent her to Chicago, which would have been unheard of before I entered the convent. I met her, spent time with her, and then because I had a long weekend, I took her back on the train. And when I moved from St. Philip Neri, I went to Jackson to Queen of Miraculous Medal. I lived there and I taught at Lumen Christi.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The kids used to come and spend a weekend with me. Until my sister Patty and my brother John was older. He was in college. He used to come and spend weekends with me. And the reason he would do it was when he had a big paper or a huge assignment to do, he wanted peace and quiet to work on it, he'd come and stay with me at the convent. And if I couldn't help him with it, some other sister would.
Wonderful.
And so we became...
Your mother was a wise woman.
He said he didn't go home because the little kids were all there, and they all wanted his attention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My sister Patty did the same thing when she was in college. She would come and spend the weekend with me to work on paperwork because there were kids at home. And I would give her a big, huge, I taught home ec, and my kids would have turkey dinners for their parents, and then they'd have all these carcasses left, and we'd make soup. And the leftover soup I would put in gallon jugs and freeze it. A college kid would like a gallon of homemade soup.
Did your siblings ever bring any of their friends, especially your brother?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
My brother, when he first dated his wife, he brought her to a dance at Lumen Christi so
Okay.
that I could meet. He didn't know she was going to be his wife at that point, but he really liked her. So he brought her to see
you were at
me
Lumen Christi. You had been in Jackson for a long time.
for a very long time.
Yes. And you taught high school.
I taught high school. When I first went, I taught introductory physical science, and I taught chef's class because there were IHM sisters there, and she taught home ec, but she didn't like the boys. So I taught the boys, and they loved it.
Chefs.
Chef's
Class.
was cooking,
Yeah, yeah.
and they absolutely loved it.
I wonder if any of them are famous chefs by now.
I don't know if they're famous chefs, but I do know they continued to cook.
Good.
When I would meet the wives in
Okay.
church for big occasions, like on Thanksgiving, they'd come home or whatever, and the wives would say, "I'm so glad my husband took your class because he makes all the pies for our family, or he
Oh,
makes
that's
the cinnamon
wonderful.
rolls, or whatever."
So that's where your gift of the kitchen, of
The
cooking
kitchen,
and
the
baking
kitchen.
came from.
Then over the years, I went through, I think, 4 different principals.
Right.
And I taught chemistry one year. That it was like I said to I taught the lower level chemistry.
Okay.
He didn't want to do it. I said, I can do it. And so I did. I taught religion. I taught a lot of foods classes because when the IHM sister left and went to Monroe, I got the girls too. And so some years I'd have 8 classes, 4 each semester. We taught 6 classes there. And I started teaching religion as my second thing.
And you never wanted to go elsewhere? You never felt called elsewhere? Or?
I went and interviewed at in Lansing
Okay.
and talked it over with God. My mother was sick at that point and said, if Mom doesn't do very well at her next big appointment, I will move to Lansing so I'm closer to help her with the kids. She did well. So I stayed where I was. And a lot of places started dropping home ec.
Right, right.
And we had a thriving program there.
And why do you suppose that was?
I don't know.
Really, that was a nice compliment.
And I also taught child development,
Okay.
Yeah. So I taught a lot of different things.
And you enjoyed it, I can tell.
And I
as you're
enjoyed it,
talking
and I
about
kept changing the class
Right.
as time would go on. The state put in a requirement that everybody had to have an arts class to graduate. Well, shoot. So I changed my sewing class to fiber arts, and I changed my cooking class to culinary arts.
Change the name.
So I didn't lose all my kids to take art.
Right. Culinary arts. Wonderful. Wise
So
woman.
a certain amount of creativity is needed to
Right.
keep going.
So now you just recently came to Adrian
Yes.
to grace us with your presence, and you've been a wonderful addition at Regina with your culinary arts. And we're going to hear more about your quilting. But you've never been any place. Once you left Lansing, once you left Jackson, you came here.
I came here. I came here on March 7th of 20.
Oh, 20. Oh, okay.
like just days before we locked down. In fact, I wasn't even all unpacked. The day I arrived, Mary Jane said, put that in the sewing room, put that in my apartment. And sometimes they were in wrong places. So maintenance were going to help me. Well, we were closed, and maintenance didn't come unless your toilet was overflowing.
Right.
So I pushed furniture up and down the hall, and
But not that quilt. You have...
the quilt thing came before I came.
And was it set up?
When I first...
Tell us about what I'm talking about, this quilting frame. It's not a small frame.
No, it's 12 and a half feet long. I had it in my living room in Jackson.
Okay.
And moved my living room furniture to a little back bedroom because I never spent any time in the living room anyway. It's 12 and a half foot long. It's a Gamble Statler stitcher. It takes up about 9 feet in width.
It's a monster.
Yes, it's a big machine. And when I had put my name in here, I was told it would take about 6 months to get a room at that time. Now it would probably take
6 years.
Yes. So I had no idea when I was coming, but that fall I decided I better... First, we had to find a room for it. And Sister Mary Jane, I came down and she took me up to the art room and said, you could use this, half of this room. And I looked at it and I thought, no way is it going to fit. But I didn't say anything. I went back home, borrowed one of those big rulers that people make when they're measuring rooms.
Yardsticks? Oh.
And brought it back, went up and measured the room. And it was 13 feet. So I contacted Mary Jane and I said, it isn't going to work up there. That's 13 feet and my machine is 12 and a half and I'm thicker than 6 inches. I can't walk around it. So
anyway, we're going to have to move on. So you got a place for it.
I got a place for it.
Behind the library.
And I called the man.
Okay.
And I needed a man who knew how to take my machine apart and put it back together. So he lives in Zanesville, Ohio. He drove up to Jackson in February. I didn't come until March. I had no idea when I was coming. But I called him probably November or December and said, when can you bring it? He said, when are you moving? I said, I don't care when I'm moving. When can you come? We'll move it when you can come.
So anyway, he came and had it.
He came, took it apart, drove it down here, carried it in. The maintenance helped him carry it in, put it up together, and I spent the night here and then went back for my oldest sister, or youngest, my next sister, Susie, who was a member of our congregation, Marie Janice, and her funeral the next day. And then 3 weeks later, I was here.
Okay. You came right at the onset of the pandemic. Okay. So coming at that time, you certainly were given time and space to do a lot of quilting.
I did a lot.
Yes.
I did.
How was the adjustment for you here?
It was okay.
Yeah.
I kept busy.
Good.
I started I call it my birthday ministry, because nothing was happening during COVID.
Right.
When we were up in our rooms, we were eating in our rooms, and people had birthdays, and so what? And I went, that's not right. So I started calling them up and saying, what would you like me to bake you for your birthday?
Oh.
And then they would tell me, and I would bake it, and I would bring it down the hall on a cart and give it to them in their rooms.
Oh, how wonderful.
And I would share it with everybody on the floor.
Oh, my word. You did that for a couple of years. You're still doing that.
I'm still doing it. But now we can gather together outside on the lobby of our floor and have a gathering.
How was that, adjusting to the pandemic, during the pandemic, afterwards? That's a big event that we've all experienced.
I think it was easier for me than many people because I had the quilting.
You had something, yeah.
I have said many times, if I hadn't had that, it would have been very difficult.
But you're a very creative woman with the quilting, with the sewing, with the baking, and this is the gift of hospitality.
Well, thank you.
And you have certainly shared that with, I mean, I didn't know that much about you, but, you know, in catching up with you, you certainly have a wonderful personality and gifts that you're not keeping to yourself.
I quilted a lot of the quilts for the Catholic charities. One of my customers makes quilts for the CAC, Child Advocacy Center.
Okay.
And all during the pandemic, I would, nobody could come here, so I would do all my business on the phone, and they would call me and say, she'd call and she'd say, I have 6 quilts for Child Advocacy Center and 1 for me. And I'd say, okay, I have a doctor's appointment in Jackson on such and such a day at this doctor's, and I'll meet you there 15 minutes early in the parking lot. And at first, when we didn't know how we got COVID, I would just pop my trunk open and she'd put it in my trunk and slam it, and I'd call her when I got home. But I didn't even bring it in right away. I would leave it out in the parking lot in the trunk for 5 or 6 days, so if there were any germs on it, they would die. Then I'd bring it in and wait a few more days before I even opened them. Then I'd call her when I put a quilt on, and I'd say, this is the quilt I've got on. What kind of thread do you want? What kind of a pattern are you interested in? And because I have probably 2,400 different patterns that I can do on the quilts. And I did well over 100 quilts during the pandemic, during our lockdown. I've done a lot more since.
And what is it? What happens to you, you know, when you're quilting? I mean, you got to look at the colors, you got to look at the design. It's an alone ministry. I mean, you're doing it by yourself.
I'm doing it by myself.
Right. So what happens within you?
My mind is pretty free once I get it all situated.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, a lot of praying goes on down there.
Right, well, that's what I was thinking.
Sometimes when it's really difficult, I have to say, okay, come on, Lord. There have been a lot of thank you, Lords, when I get a difficult thing finished, something that's I've been really working on. I build it on the computer.
Okay.
And then the computer, my machine is computer aided. And that means it's all built on the computer. I have to drag the machine around and make the sizes of where I want the design to go. Then I go to the computer and tweak it to get inside that place, and then bring the machine over to it and tell it to quilt, and it quilts it.
But you've designed it and you created the...
Yes.
You know, as I'm looking at your Christmas one, let's hold that one up there. Watch your microphone. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Now this, I mean...
Each of the leaves, I drag the machine around it.
Yeah.
And I use different colors in different places. And there are all kinds of different patterns on it.
Now this would be a wall hanging? It could be.
Or it can be a table topper.
Table topper, okay. It's magnificent, just magnificent.
You know.
Okay. Now let's look at the one that's, don't get up from the couch, I'll take
I won't.
this.
Okay.
Yeah.
This one is just what's called an edge to edge. And it is one pattern repeated all over it. The sewing pattern is called pineapple.
Okay.
And it has a wool bat. It's great for winter. Keeps you really warm. I don't need blankets. I have one of these and a sheet.
How do you ever get tired doing this? Do you ever get bored doing this?
No.
No.
It's a real challenge. I just did one that I'm especially proud of. Not that it's the most beautiful one I've ever done. One of my former students called, and her daughter had a quilt that wanted to. Now the mother that knows nothing about quilting. She's a very intelligent woman. In fact, she's a surgeon at the U of M, but she doesn't know anything about fabric. So the daughter had pretty much done it on her own. When it arrived, it laid on a table like that, and I went, oh dear. So I spent about 3.5 or 4 hours on it, getting it to lay flat, taking seams, cutting, all kinds of things. Then I finally got it on the machine. And I called the mother and I said, tell me about your daughter. She said, what do you mean? I said, I need to know something that she likes or does. I need to know how to quilt this quilt. And she said, gosh, Sister Barb, the only way I can describe her is she likes to read all the time. I said, oh, you've got a bookworm. She said, yes. I said, thank you. So I found a pattern that was a bookworm. It had books on it and worms. The worm was really cute. He had big glasses and little beady eyes on him, and then a worm body.
Yeah.
And so I quilted it in bookworm, and I gave it to her, sent it back to her through her mother. When she got it, she called me and she said, this is just fabulous, absolutely fabulous. You turned a sow's ear into a silk purse. Oh. You made an heirloom. My daughter is delighted with it. And I said, well, I'll make you a deal. I'm going to include 2 hours of lessons for your daughter if she wants to make another one. I'll give her 2 hours of my time, and we'll see if she can learn a few things that will make it easier for her. And she was just so delighted with it.
And so then you did do that.
Yeah. And when I gave her bill, she said, I'm not paying that. And I said, okay. She said, I'm giving you more money than that because you worked extra hard on this. But it's one of the joys of quilting. Sometimes you turn something into something better than it was when it came to see you.
Right. Like all of us.
Yeah.
And each day we become better than who we were this morning when we got up.
That's right.
And you're part of that.
I hope to be.
What do you think God has, the Spirit has, planned for your future?
I don't know.
You don't know?
None of us really know.
No.
I just keep hoping that I can keep doing things as long as possible.
Yeah. And inviting people into your space.
Yes.
Yes. And helping
them. I have
them.
2 ladies coming tomorrow. One of them has a new quilt machine, and the other one knows me, and she doesn't know how to put a quilt on. So I just said, are you vaccinated? And she said, yes. And I said, okay, you can come and I'll show you.
Okay, so you can bring her up to the
I can bring her up
room,
there and
to your
give her a
room.
few lessons.
Okay. Well, Barb, thank you ever so much. And you just keep on creating and being hospitable and cooking and baking and inviting people into a very significant part of your life. And I'm sure everyone in your family has a quilt.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
The one I'm working on is for my brother.
Yeah, my sister's a quilter, so I certainly appreciate all that goes into quilting. Right now she can't. She had to give it up because arthritis. So, but anyway, thank you. God bless you. The congregation thanks you. And your spirit, you've just got a very positive, welcoming spirit about
Thank you.
you. That is a gift. That is a gift.
I think I got that from my mother.
Ah, what a blessing. Well, she loved life and she loved kids, huh?
She did.
And that was nice.
And she loved family.
Family was
and
important.
we are extremely close.
Yeah. Okay, that's wonderful. I know you've had some losses recently too. So, anyway, just know we're delighted that you're a member of the congregation, and the
so am
the artistic work that you are about is a gift, truly a gift. As
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Barb.